Hello, this is Tessa Kegel and this is HBS5OHC, Identifying and Controlling Hazards, Mitigation of Health Impacts, Environmental and Biological Monitoring, and this is part 2. So what do we mean by health or biological monitoring? Environmental monitoring may measure what the worker is exposed to, but not what the worker absorbs into their body. Biological monitoring complements environmental monitoring by measuring levels for substances such as metabolites in body fluids such as sweat, urine, blood, or exhaled air. Biological monitoring techniques are available for only a limited number of substances, and the collection and preservation of samples and interpretation of results have limitations. As with environmental monitoring, biological monitoring in itself is not preventive, and the use of the results should be part of a preventive program. Health monitoring. Safe Work Australia defines health monitoring as a means to identify changes in a person's health status because of exposure to certain substances. The Australian National Work Health and Safety Act requires that a person conducting a business or undertaking, henceforth called a PCBU, which is usually the employer, provides health monitoring for workers who are carrying out ongoing work using, handling, generating or storing hazardous chemicals, and there is a significant risk to the worker's health of exposure to a scheduled chemical or asbestos. So how do we decide if there's a significant risk? The level of risk to workers from exposure to hazardous chemicals depends on the hazards as well as the frequency, duration, and amount of exposure, that is, the dose. To determine the level of risk, it's necessary to draw together the information gathered about how the hazardous chemical is used and the way it is used in the workplace. And this information is usually found out through a walkthrough survey or through monitoring, environmental monitoring, and so on. Health monitoring must be carried out or done under the supervision of a registered medical practitioner with experience in occupational health monitoring. And an employee must be consulted about health monitoring. A health monitoring report must include the employee's PCBUs and medical practitioners' details, any test results, any diagnoses of illness or disease involving a chemical that triggered the requirements for health monitoring, and any recommendations or actions requiring new or changed control measures or medical counselling. Health monitoring records cannot be disclosed without written consent except for various circumstances. Health monitoring costs, such as time off work, doctor's fees, testing and analysis costs, and travel expenses, must be paid for by the PCBU. Records must be kept for at least 30 years, and this rises to 40 years for asbestos, even if an employee leaves a place of employment. Under the Work Health and Safety Act, an employee must follow any reasonable instructions regarding health monitoring so that the PCBU can comply with health monitoring obligations. If health monitoring shows that an employee has been exposed to a hazardous chemical which has caused disease, illness or injury, the PCBU is required to act to minimise or eliminate exposure. A copy of an adverse health monitoring report must be sent to the regulator. So, what is health monitoring? What might it entail? Now, there are a range of different types of health monitoring appropriate for exposure to a range of different hazardous chemicals. So these include interview questions, medical examination, biological effect monitoring, and biological exposure monitoring. Now, this table has been adapted from the Safe Work Australia publication, and it provides examples of appropriate test methods. So say in the situation or type of chemical, for a chemical that's known to cause respiratory irritation or reduction in respiratory function, the test method might be spirometry, which is a lung function test, which may be used to assess exposure to this hazardous chemical. For a chemical that is known to cause specific observable health effects, such as skin irritation or a rash, health monitoring may involve simple observation of the worker's skin by an occupational nurse or through self-observation and reporting. Where exposure to the chemical is known to cause that chemical or a metabolite to be present in urine or blood analysis for that chemical or metabolite may be used to assess exposure.